One blanket, two worlds, and a bride who won't let go. We begin in the bone-chilling cold of Frista 9, a planet where the wind howls as if it carries the size of the universe. Snow falls endlessly, layering over solar panels, sensor pylons, and the hearts of the survivors. Amid the white frost, a Terran technician is doing what he considers the simplest act of the day, tossing a blanket to the being he just saved. A kind gesture, right? But to someone trembling in the corner of the room, a half-alien, half-werewolf girl with eyes glowing in the dark, it's not just a blanket, it's a commitment. And Mike Doran has no idea that his life has just been bound by a piece of synthetic fabric. Mike set his toolkit down on the metal floor and gave his wrist a light shake, the springs in his glove joints clicking in steady rhythm. The thermal blanket in his hand is heavy thick, but worth far less than the med pack or the plasma gun hanging behind the door. Still, it was the only thing he had in his grasp when he saw the creature curled up and shivering by the ventilation shaft. Pulled her out of the storm, he muttered, and now I'm a damn babysitter. He tossed the blanket lightly toward her, not thinking much, just the reflex of someone not heartless enough to ignore a freezing creature. She said nothing, just lifted her head, sparkling gray eyes, pointed ears twitching slightly. She pulled the blanket tightly around herself, then trembled as she crawled into the corner of the room, as if she were embracing a part of herself long lost. Mike sighed and turned back to the data screen. He didn't see it, but she was watching him intently, as if she had just received an ancient marriage proposal. A few hours later, the outpost's internal AI spoke, a female mechanical voice, polite, but no different than a Federation secretary who just discovered an office romance. Confirmation hybrid subject Xeno Canid Class 3 is currently cohabitating at Outpost 47 FR9. Encoding provisional marital status has been activated under Clause 6.4 of the Multi-Species Cultural Accord. Mike looked up. What the hell? The screen flashed with the following text: System pair confirmed. Initiating lifestyle synchronization. Sharing of resources and living space. She's only been here for less than 6 hours, Mike yelled at the system. It was just a blanket, just a blanket. The AI replied, its voice disturbingly calm. According to Canid Custom, sharing a personal blanket with high biothermal value is a Tier 1 courtship signal. Failure to retract within 3 hours constitutes acceptance. Mike looked toward the corner of the room. The girl, now looking a bit tidier, still clutching the blanket, trying to fold it carefully with claw-tipped fingers, was gazing at him with hope. He sighed again. Dear God, I just married a wolf girl with a blanket. That night, Mike slept in the storage room. The main room was already occupied. It's not that I'm scared, he told the AI, it's just, she growls in her sleep. Recorded data, territorial behavior exhibited due to reception of unreciprocated intimate gestures lacking traditional protocol response. Recommendation: avoid territorial disputes over sleeping arrangements. AI, Mike grumbled. Did you just say I failed to respond with intimate protocol? Confirmed. Would you like to initiate the interspecies marriage tutorial program? Turn it off. The next morning, Mike walked into the room and saw the girl licking the blanket clean. He blinked. What are you doing? She looked up, tilting her head to the side, the exact way a puppy reacts to a strange sound. Cleaning, she said, voice hoarse, not yet fluent. Our blanket. Mike collapsed into his chair. God damn it. Mike was never good at explaining emotions. He was a technician, the kind of guy who believed in logic, circuit diagrams, and data. But no data could have prepared him for the sight before him, a half-werewolf girl folding a blanket as if it were a lifelong vow. And no data set could have readied him for her next statement. Mike, is it made? He nearly choked on his coffee. No, he shot up. I just lent you a blanket. Lent, it's not a symbol of interplanetary marriage. She tilted her head. But blanket is warm. Warm is bond. Bond is a life pair. As per Winter Act Number 7, Clause 3. Wait, hold on. Are you quoting your ancestral laws to prove I just married you? She nodded, very seriously. Her ears perked like she'd just passed an interview. Mike turned desperately to the AI. Cancel confirmation, revoke the provisional marriage status. The AI responded with the calm of a court clerk, unable. Under the union accord, if both parties have shared personal warmth in an enclosed space for more than 3 hours, without submitting a formal objection, the status is considered valid. She doesn't even speak fluent, human Mike protested. Consent recorded via nonverbal behavior, accepting, wrapping in and holding the blanket close to heart during deep sleep posture. Verified by corner cam number 3. Mike felt like the universe was trolling him. The following days were silent chaos. Misha wasn't loud, but she existed. From bite-marked bowls to her claiming the heater by curling under it all afternoon. Mike just quietly went about fixing sensors, plumbing systems, and cleaning up fur. A lot of fur. AI, he said one morning upon finding Misha asleep. In his chair, do I have the right to request deportation? An interspecies mate cannot be deported unless they pose a violent, life-threatening danger. Otherwise, data suggests the subject is exhibiting nesting behavior, which often leads to long-term conflict reduction. She used my pillow as a nest standard progression. Congratulations. Still, it wasn't without bright spots. Misha learned quickly. She was curious, especially about electronics. One time she blew up the rice cooker by increasing the power to cook faster. Mike nearly yelled at her, but stopped when he saw her timid eyes, as if she was bracing for punishment. It's okay, he sighed. Just ask me next time, all right? She nodded. The next day, she rebuilt a rice cooker herself, using scrap metal, a spare heating unit, and part of Mike's old chair frame. Ours, she said. Rice, shared. Mike blinked. There was something small, warm about that. That night, as the wind howled outside, Mike stood watching her silhouette quietly slicing dried vegetables for soup. Her silver fur shimmered under the dim outpost light. She placed a bowl in front of him without saying a word. Just a gentle aroma and a quiet whisper afterward. Mike, not alone. He gripped the spoon. A strange thought crossed his mind. Maybe, just maybe, he didn't hate sharing a blanket as much as he thought. But then that night, the warning screen flashed red. An unknown signal in the upper atmosphere. An unfamiliar ship was landing on Frista 9. Not Union. No approach transmission. No permission request. The AI spoke alert-level signal detected. Origin unidentified. Engine radiation matches Canid Royal Tier technology. Signal ID Varnau. Mike frowned. Varnau Misha stepped out from the shadows. Her eyes were cold, ears flattened. It is the one once betrothed. What the one who comes to reclaim wife? Mike collapsed into his chair. He looked at the blanket in the corner. I'm really gonna die because of that blanket. Misha stood motionless by the door, the fur on her nape bristling, her body tense like a drawn bow. The pale green light from the control panel lit up her face, highlighting 2 faint scars beneath her left eye marks Mike had never noticed before. Her voice lowered each word, cutting into memory like a blade. Varnau has arrived. Mike turned around, still wearing his maintenance suit smeared with coal dust. And he's the one you were once promised to? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she bowed her head quietly, ears drooping with the instinct of a predator-blooded species, but her gaze stayed firm. Not promised. It was a forced blood bond, an old ritual, now forbidden. But he doesn't care. Mike swallowed. And you ran away from it. Yes. A single word, but heavy with weight. Outside, the unidentified signal steadily entered Frista 9's atmosphere. The outpost's AI began switching to emergency protocol. Intrusion signal confirmed. Not registered with the Union. Ship class light tactical assault. Armaments 4 plasma cannons. 1 armor-piercing Module 2 recon drones. Warning confrontation may result in fatalities. Mike slapped the screen. Light assault weapons. On a planet covered in ice and windstorms. What kind of lunatic picks this place to reclaim a bride? The AI replied coldly. According to Canid cultural analysis, harsh climate is considered a site of true love's trial. Engaging in battle amid a snowstorm signifies determination to claim one's mate. Mike blinked. Great. He's a Romeo with weapons of mass destruction. For the next 2 hours, they said nothing. Mike repaired the perimeter sensors to avoid interference. Misha checked the energy valves and slipped something into her sleeve, a curved blade etched with runes that resembled ancient script. The air grew heavier like before a storm. But it wasn't snowing. It was the silence. Mike was the first to speak. "You don't have to stay here." She turned to him, eyes surprised. "I mean, if you leave the outpost, he won't bother this place anymore." Misha shook her head. "If I leave, he wins." Mike opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time, he had no rebuttal. Not with logic, not with reason, only a feeling. And that feeling was that he couldn't let her face this alone. "You don't need to," Misha replied. Eyes that night they ate together, in silence. Mike made soup from leftover vegetables. Misha ate it spoon by spoon, as if every drop was part of her final preparations. Mike stared into his bowl. "I don't know how to fight." Till on her bowl. "Just don't leave me behind." That wasn't a declaration of love, but it was the closest thing two survivors could ever say. When the alien ship's landing was confirmed, distance 3.2 kilometers, the AI announced landing site abandoned mine, North Sector. Estimated travel time 1 hour. Mike stood up. "We need a plan. My weapons aren't enough, but I know the mine's layout. Enough to set a few little surprises." Misha clenched her fist. "Mike." He paused. She stepped forward slowly and gently placed a hand against his chest. Not forceful, not clawed, just a quiet touch of trust. "Thank you for not throwing the blanket away." Mike chuckled softly. "That blanket may be the dumbest thing I've ever done. But if I had to do it again, I would." Misha tilted her head, nodded slightly. "Next time, I'll pick a better color." And so they began. A technician in a torn suit, a half-blood warrior girl holding an old dagger, and an AI with the personality of an office supervisor, preparing for a battle in the snow. For a blanket. For the right to choose who you stand beside. And for something they hadn't yet dared to name affection. The snowstorm came at dawn, as if the planet Frista 9 itself knew that today was not a normal day. Everything outside the window was white. The wind blew so hard it made the outpost dome shudder, not because the structure was weak, but because the heart of the person inside had started to waver. Mike carefully tightened the mini pulse jammer transmitter around his wrist, the only device capable of temporarily scrambling recon drones. He wasn't trained to fight, but he knew how to make machines explode at the right time. Misha stepped out from the back engineering room. She wore a modified anti-ice coat Mike had adjusted. It was too long for her frame, but still retained heat well. Her silver furred tail hung to one side, and for the first time she wore Mike's protective goggles. "I'm ready," she said. Mike nodded. "But before we go out," he said, pointing at the screen, "I want to ask something." Misha tilted her head. "Why is the blanket so important in your culture?" A breath. She stepped closer, eyes focused on the simulation of Varnau's ship slowly approaching the old mine. "In my tribe," she began, voice low, "we don't talk much. We don't propose with words. We just share a blanket because a blanket is what keeps life going in the cold. If someone shares it with another, it means accepting to live or die together in the storm." She turned to look at Mike. "A blanket is not marriage. A blanket is a choice that cannot be taken back." Mike gave a soft laugh. "Now I understand why you got mad when I slept in the storage room. Lucky for you I didn't bite," she muttered. Mike let out a dry chuckle. "Yeah, I was kind of worried back then too. The plan was simple, like all plans before they fail. Mike would lure Varnau and his team into the abandoned mining tunnels. The old shafts and vents were perfect for traps. They had scattered signal jammers, geothermal mines, and a few visual deception tricks using reflective glass. Misha would be the bait. Mike hated that part, but she insisted. "I am the reason he came. Let me be the reason he loses." And then they split up in silence. Mike was never good at goodbyes, especially when there was a chance it would be the last one. Meanwhile, Varno was unfazed. He walked across the ice like a predator that had already scented blood. "We've seen her tracks," one soldier reported, heading toward the mines. "No signs of heavy resistance?" "There doesn't need to be resistance," Varno growled. "She's just playing a human game, stalling. But her blood will betray her." He raised his wrist, a biotic device glowing red, an ancient piece of tech from the days when the Canid royals ruled the southern nebulae. Blood resonance, he said. We are connected. She cannot hide. But there was one thing Varnow hadn't accounted for. Misha had broken that bond long ago. Through pain, through her own blood, and through something he could never understand: choice. Mike hid behind a collapsed iron block in the mine hand, ready on the detonation panel. His heart pounded so loudly it nearly drowned out the howling wind. Through a wall-mounted camera, he saw Varnow step inside. Tall, wearing traditional armor, eyes glowing red like blood preserved in ice. Mike whispered into the radio, "Misha, he's in." No reply. "Are you still in position?" Still no answer. Mike swallowed hard. "Don't die on me." Suddenly the camera shifted. A slight pan was at the wind. Or did someone touch it? Mike squinted. A faint shadow moved at the edge of the tunnel. Not Varnow, not his troops. It was Misha. She appeared at just the right moment, calm, decisive, and smiling. The first smile he'd ever seen from her. No fear, no sadness. Just solve. "Varnow," she called, her voice echoing through the mine. "You're too late. I came to bring you home," he growled. "You are pure blood. You are the future queen." "No," she answered. "I am Misha, the one who chose the blanket. The one who chose—" "Mike!" Varnow roared and charged. The moment he stepped into the third light marker, Mike hit the button. The entire shaft trembled. The explosion wasn't massive, but it was precise. The stone ceiling began to collapse, and Misha vanished into the darkness. Mike raced to the rendezvous point. She wasn't there. He ran down every side tunnel. Misha. No response. His heart pounded louder than ever before in his life. Then, a sound. From behind a bent iron door, a silver-furred hand reached out. "You?" Misha staggered out, bloodied but alive. He caught her. She looked at him, panting, but smiled. "Mike, I still have the blanket." Mike laughed. Right then, amid the ruins of the mine and spreading blood, that was all they had left. A piece of blanket and a choice. No one prepared Mike for being kissed back to life. But that's exactly what happened. After the mine collapse, Mike woke up in a makeshift medbay, really just a mat laid on the engineering room floor, wrapped in thermal cords and the soft glow of emergency lights. He felt like he'd been hit by a train, but instead of sharp pain, his body burned with a strange heat. Not pain, but strange. And the first thing he saw was Misha kneeling beside him, one trembling hand placed on his chest, her eyes wide with a look of worry he had never seen before. "Mike." He tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness forced his head back down. "You survived," he groaned. "Yes, but Mike had trauma, internal displacement. I used an ancient healing ritual." Mike blinked. "Ritual? What now?" Misha lowered her head. Her ears drooped. She held out a device that looked like a small crystal pulsing with soft blue light. "Life energy transfer. Requires direct contact." "You mean—" She looked away. "Mouth. To my mouth." Mike froze. She quickly added, "No intent. Just ancient biomedical method. Not mating ritual. I didn't declare mating." Mike sighed, placing a hand on his forehead. "It's just, I woke up with a faint taste of mint. I chewed shock leaf to support energy transfer," she whispered. He closed his eyes. "Great. My first kiss was a life-saving mouth-to-mouth from a half-wolf girl, using traditional therapy." The AI's voice chimed in behind him, as blunt as ever. "Confirmation Class 1 oral contact recorded biohealing category. Updated relationship status to stable pair, physiologically compatible. Updating union interspecies compatibility database." Mike groaned. "I swear I never signed consent for that label." Misha bowed her head again. "I apologize if Mike is uncomfortable." He opened his eyes, looked at her. A moment passed. Then he laughed, softly, almost tiredly. "No, it's just, I thought I'd die alone on this frozen rock, and now I'm alive thanks to a blanket and an emergency medical kiss." Misha nodded. Romantic, she said. Very, he replied, half sarcastic, half sincere. The next day, when Mike could walk again, the two stepped outside for the first time since Varnow was buried. The sky over Frista 9 was still gray, but the thick ice had receded after the blast. Snow blanketed the ground like a white tablecloth. They stood at the edge of the mine where it all ended. Mike planted a warning beacon, and Misha placed a small stone on top engraved with an ancient symbol. For him, Mike asked. For what we ended, she replied. Back at the outpost, Misha sat at the screen reviewing their remaining inventory, then typed a few lines into the data console. Mike looked over her shoulder. What's that submitting proposal to upgrade outpost to stable residence? Status Union Form 4B. He frowned. Since when are you familiar with union paperwork? She mumbled, face reddening. I read all union forms while Mike slept to understand the system and not be expelled. He was silent for a few seconds, then quietly said, I never planned to expel you. Blanket or no blanket? Misha looked up, a soft smile, not the warrior's grin, but a companion's. Then, may I plant a garden? On Frista 9. We have a climate chamber. I want to try. Kale. Scallions. Mike chuckled. If you manage to grow kale on this planet, I'll actually marry you. She tilted her head. No need for marriage. Just a blanket and kale. And so from the wreckage of a clash between ancient customs and new life, from a misunderstanding full of snow and snarls, two strangers began to build a home. No wedding, no contract, no marriage in the human sense. Just a blanket still washed weekly, and two people who decided not to leave each other. Because in the frozen world of Frista 9, the only warmth that truly mattered didn't come from the heater. When the outpost's heating system finally stabilized the days after the mine explosion passed in a strange way. No more emergency alerts, no more unknown signals, just the familiar hum of machines' steady breathing and Misha's soft growl whenever Mike hogged most of the blanket at night. It was no longer living together out of circumstance. It was truly living together. In the mornings, they ate together. They didn't talk much, but Mike noticed that Misha always served him the hotter bowl of soup. In the afternoon, she often snuck into the supply bay to repair old equipment, not out of necessity, but simply because she wanted to help. At night, they'd sleep at opposite ends of the bed, but always woke up facing the same direction. One day, Mike opened compartment 5 to grab a ventilation filter and found Misha singing. Not quite singing, just a long, drawn-out hum, like a wolf's howl, but deep and strangely soothing. A sound not meant for outsiders, but for memory. He stood still. What song is that, he asked when she paused. Misha turned ears, slightly perked. A traditional lullaby. My mother used to sing it to me, before she was chosen for another blood-bonding alliance. Mike nodded quietly. I never knew my mother, he replied. She died when I was really young. My dad was an engineer, the kind of guy who believed if the wires were connected properly, the world wouldn't fall apart. Misha tilted her head. And Mike, I'm the same kind of guy. She chuckled softly. The world's fallen apart a few times already. But the blanket hasn't torn. He laughed. That should go on a t-shirt. After many peaceful days, something unusual happened. The outpost received a routine inspection signal from the Union. When the outpost heating system finally stabilized, the days after the mine explosion passed in a strange way. No more emergency alerts, no more unknown signals. Just the familiar hum of machines, steady breathing, and Misha's soft growl whenever Mike hogged most of the blanket at night. It was no longer living together out of circumstance. It was truly living together. In the mornings, they ate together. They didn't talk much, but Mike noticed that Misha always served him the hotter bowl of soup. In the afternoon, she often snuck into the supply bay to repair old equipment, not out of necessity, but simply because she wanted to help. At night, they'd sleep at opposite ends of the bed, but always woke up facing the same direction. One day, Mike opened compartment 5 to grab a ventilation filter and found Misha singing. Not quite singing, just a long, drawn-out hum like a wolf's howl, but deep and strangely soothing. A sound not meant for outsiders, but for memory. He stood still. What song is that, he asked when she paused. Misha turned ears slightly perked. A traditional lullaby. My mother used to sing it to me before she was chosen for another blood bonding alliance. Mike nodded quietly. I never knew my mother, he replied. She died when I was really young. My dad was an engineer, the kind of guy who believed if the wires were connected properly, the world wouldn't fall apart. Misha tilted her head. And Mike? I'm the same kind of guy. She chuckled softly. The world's fallen apart a few times already. But the blanket hasn't torn. He laughed. That should go on a t-shirt. After many peaceful days, something unusual happened. The outpost received a routine inspection signal from the Union. When the outpost's heating system finally stabilized the days after the mine explosion passed in a strange way, no more emergency alerts, no more unknown signals. Just the familiar hum of machines, steady breathing, and Misha's soft growl whenever Mike hogged most of the blanket at night. It was no longer living together out of circumstance. It was truly living together. In the mornings, they ate together. They didn't talk much, but Mike noticed that Misha always served him the hotter bowl of soup. In the afternoon, she often snuck into the supply bay to repair old equipment, not out of necessity, but simply because she wanted to help. At night, they'd sleep at opposite ends of the bed, but always woke up facing the same direction. One day, Mike opened compartment 5 to grab a ventilation filter and found Misha singing. Not quite singing, just a long, drawn-out hum like a wolf's howl, but deep and strangely soothing. A sound not meant for outsiders, but for memory. He stood still. What song is that, he asked when she paused. Misha turned ears slightly perked. A traditional lullaby. My mother used to sing it to me before she was chosen for another blood bonding alliance. Mike nodded quietly. I never knew my mother, he replied. She died when I was really young. My dad was an engineer, the kind of guy who believed if the wires were connected properly, the world wouldn't fall apart. Misha tilted her head. And Mike? I'm the same kind of guy. She chuckled softly. The world's fallen apart a few times already. But the blanket hasn't torn. He laughed. That should go on a t-shirt. After many peaceful days, something unusual happened. The outpost received a routine inspection signal from the Union. When the outpost heating system finally stabilized the days after the mine explosion passed in a strange way. No more emergency alerts, no more unknown signals. Just the familiar hum of machines, steady breathing, and Misha's soft growl whenever Mike hogged most of the blanket at night. It was no longer living together out of circumstance. It was truly living together. In the mornings, they ate together. They didn't talk much, but Mike noticed that Misha always served him the hotter bowl of soup. In the afternoon, she often snuck into the supply bay to repair old equipment, not out of necessity, but simply because she wanted to help. At night, they'd sleep at opposite ends of the bed, but always woke up facing the same direction. One day, Mike opened compartment 5 to grab a ventilation filter and found Misha singing. Not quite singing, just a long, drawn-out hum like a wolf's howl, but deep and strangely soothing. A sound not meant for outsiders, but for memory. He stood still. What song is that, he asked when she paused. Misha turned ears slightly perked. A traditional lullaby. My mother used to sing it to me before she was chosen for another blood bonding alliance. Mike nodded quietly. I never knew my mother, he replied. She died when I was really young. My dad was an engineer, the kind of guy who believed if the wires were connected properly, the world wouldn't fall apart. Misha tilted her head. And Mike? I'm the same kind of guy. She chuckled softly. The world's fallen apart a few times already. But the blanket hasn't torn. He laughed. That should go on a t-shirt. After many peaceful days, something unusual happened. The outpost received a routine inspection signal from the Union. A patrol ship would arrive in 72 hours. Mission: verify the interspecies pairing status reported by the AI and ensure no signs of exploitation, coercion, or violations of cultural consent. Mike nearly spat coffee all over the console. Crap. They think I forced you. Misha blinked. No, they'll think I forced Mike. He stared. No one's going to believe a Terran technician dared propose to a Canid warrior with a blanket. And so for the next 3 days, they practiced. Not combat, but pretending to be a valid couple. Misha learned to smile more gently. Mike learned to hold hands without flinching. The AI constantly offered advice like, suggested cheek angle when gazing should range between 23 to 35 degrees to optimize perceived trust. Mike slammed the table. AI, can you stop matchmaking based on analytics? Negative. I have been upgraded with marital counseling protocols. Good luck, model couple. Dr. 47 FR9. The Union patrol ship arrived on the morning of the fourth day. 3 officials in gray uniforms disembarked a legal officer, a xenobiology specialist, and a psychological consultant. They didn't smile, didn't shake hands, just activated scanners and said requesting verification of reported pair bond status at this outpost. Mike swallowed. Misha just tilted her head. We share a blanket. He retains heat very well. The legal officer took notes. Is there evidence of emotional attachment? Misha nodded. Mike, for the first time in his life, took her hand. Lightly, but didn't let go. Yes, he said. Not in the way you define it. But enough that I don't want her to leave. A moment of silence. Then the xenobiologist asked, and how do you plan to live here? Misha opened a list. I've grown 2 rows of kale, 1 small patch of eggplants. Mike built an auxiliary solar panel array. We're rebuilding the system into a home. The psychological consultant smiled for the first time. And what do you call each other? Misha hesitated. Mike answered, blanket partners. Misha nodded. Blanket partners. But not forced. When the Union team departed, they left behind a new file. Outpost 47 FR9 was now categorized under voluntary dual-species cohabitation. Cold Region Model Class 3. Mike held the copy and looked at Misha. You just made the Union invent a whole new housing classification. She shrugged. I just didn't want to leave the blanket. From that day on, the little outpost wasn't just a place to survive. It became proof that a technician and a warrior could build something, regardless of outdated definitions. Light snow fell in the morning after the Union delegation had left. No more alarms, no more patrol teams, just 2 people, 1 mildly insane AI, and a patch of frozen land slowly gaining the warmth of life. Mike stood next to their tiny greenhouse, really just a few hydroponic trays rigged together, watching the kale leaves tremble slightly in the wind. He hadn't expected that what would move him this morning wouldn't be a battle for survival, but a single deep green kale leaf. Misha stepped out the familiar blanket draped over her shoulder. She handed him a small bowl. Kale soup. First batch. He took it smiling. If I pass out from plant toxins, you're responsible. Mike survived an explosion and a medical kiss, she replied. A bowl of soup can't hurt you. He laughed. Hard to argue with that. The day passed in an oddly peaceful quiet. Mike checked control panels, Misha wiped down the signal emitters, and the AI was composing love poems in energy chart format. I register increased energy pulses whenever the infrared sensors detect the 2 blanket partners standing close together. I've labeled this mutual thermal resonance cycle. Mike folded the datapad shut. AI, say one more thing, and I'll update your firmware manually. Noted emotional deflection in speech. Confirmed presence of thermal resonance. That evening, they sat together in the main room. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. Mike draped the blanket over both their legs. It was a gesture long familiar. But this time, Misha didn't just pull it close. She leaned gently against his shoulder. Micah? Yeah. Were you scared? When I showed up, when all this started, he was quiet for a while. Not because he didn't know the answer, but because the question had struck something deep. Yes. At first I was very scared. Not because you were a stranger, but because I was used to being alone. You disrupted my systems, my schedule, my discipline, my silence. Misha lowered her head. I'm sorry, he shook his head. No. Now I think. Silence isn't peace. It's just the absence of someone to listen to. She smiled softly. That night the snow fell heavier than usual. Mike woke up to the sensation of someone stirring beside him. Misha was lying on her side, breathing softly. At some point, her arm had draped over him. Beneath the blanket, her clawed hand gently held his, not gripping, not clinging, just touching. Just enough to feel real. Mike didn't pull away. For the first time in years, he didn't dream of war machines, broken schematics, or failed uplinks to Central Command. He dreamed of a home small, cold, but glowing warm from within. It smelled of soup. It held the warmth of a creature that didn't belong to his world, but had somehow become the only world he needed. The next morning, the alert signal went off. Mike bolted upright, Misha too instinctively reaching for her dagger. "What now?" he muttered. The AI announced almost gleefully, "Signal from the old mine sector. Biological movement detected." Misha looked at him. Impossible. Varnow was, could be not him, Mike said quickly. Could be a drone or a leftover squad mate. They suited up, grabbed weapons and emergency med kits. Careful. No one wanted a nasty surprise just as things were starting to feel safe. When they arrived, they found a creature groaning in the crevice, not a canid, but an illith, a biogaseous being previously recorded as one of Varnow's mercenaries. It was injured, parts of its form cracked and faintly glowing. "Don't kill," it whispered. "I no longer follow him." Mike knelt to check the wound. Misha stood still, wary, but didn't approach. Illith looked at her, then at Mike. "You two really chose each other." "Yeah," Mike replied, with a blanket. Illith let out a sound, maybe laughter, then passed out. Mike applied temporary bandages. They carried the creature back to the outpost. Misha looked at him, voice low. "You know, even free choice comes with responsibility." Mike nodded. "I know, but if responsibility means choosing you, I'm not afraid of it." She smiled this time, a smile with no hesitation. "Then we share it." And so they began a new chapter. One man, one warrior, one annoying AI, and one alien being who used to be the enemy. No one taught them how to live together. But in the cold, if you still know how to keep each other warm, that's already the start of a family. When Aleth regained consciousness, it said nothing for the first 12 hours. It simply lay on a mat in the auxiliary storage room, its dimly glowing eyes fixed on the icy wall. Its body semi-transparent like condensed mist in a gelatinous biological shell, emitted gentle vibrations like breathing. Mike checked the biometric readings. Stable, but psychologically, I've got no clue. Misha stood with arms crossed, her gaze as sharp as ever. "I don't trust it. You've saved me more than once," Mike said, "and I used to think you might kill me over a blanket." Misha gave him a look, her ear twitching slightly. "I never intended to kill you." "Right," Mike grinned. "You just sniffed me while I was sleeping." "To detect toxin levels," she muttered. The AI chimed in exactly when no one asked for it. Confirmation sent compatibility between candid subject and Mike is 87%. That is 11.3 points above the average intra-clan mating threshold. Mike burst out laughing. Misha grimaced. AI disable the preferred scent report. Unable. The emotional sensory module has been permanently upgraded. Elith's presence was inconvenient, but not exactly threatening. It was quiet, polite, and only asked for small amounts of electrical charge to maintain molecular stability. Once it could walk, it began assisting Mike with secondary circuit repairs, not out of debt, but because it needed something to feel useful. One day while Mike was wiping down the control panels, Elith softly said, "I used to hear about Earthlings. Chaotic, overly emotional, unstable." Mike paused. Charming reputation. Elith tilted its head. "But then I saw, you choose each other based on things no one considers strategic assets, a meal, a direct glance, a piece of fabric." Mike blinked. "We don't represent humanity. We only represent each other." That night, Aleth sat near the heater, technically a thermal energy recycler, and asked a question that left both Mike and Misha silent. If a being once did wrong, but has nowhere to return to, what do you think about letting it stay? Mike looked at Misha. No words needed. She nodded. "There's no space here for the past," Mike said. "Only snow kale and people trying not to die of loneliness." Elith nodded slowly. then sighed. I'll learn how to garden. Misha raised an eyebrow. You know how to hold a trowel I can absorb light and stimulate photosynthesis. Close enough. After that, the three of them, a technician, a warrior, and a mist being, began rebuilding the right wing of the outpost into a communal space. No one called it a home, but they all knew it was something sturdier than steel, a place chosen by those who had once been left behind. Illith often told the AI stories about destroyed planets, extinct species deemed unfit for power structures. The AI recorded them and turned them into poems, terrible ones but heartfelt. Mike discovered a new joy, teaching Misha how to bake. Not very successfully. The first batch was pitch black. The second, AI flagged it, carbon content exceeds safe respiratory threshold. Misha stared at the charred cookies. Mike patted her shoulder. Let's call it carbon-structured love biscuits. She looked at him like she might bite him, but then smiled. I'll try again. One day while reconnecting an energy conduit, Elith paused and asked if I sent a signal to a few other displaced beings. Could they come here? Mike blinked. You mean, turn this place into a refuge? Misha froze mid-task. Elith continued quietly. Not many, just those who were cast out. Considered obsolete in the old systems. Mike said nothing. Then he looked outside the pale blue sky, the snow still falling. He thought about the blanket, about Misha's soft snoring, about the gentle glow in the small kitchen, the scent of their first soup, and then he nodded. If they have nowhere to go, why not start from a place no one thought of? Misha stood behind him, said nothing, but after dinner, as Mike was getting ready for bed, she whispered, You know, if you agree to take in strangers, that means you're sharing this home. Mike turned to look at her. She still held the blanket, now frayed and slightly torn at the edge. He gently took one corner of it. No, I'm just expanding it. Misha paused. Then she said very softly, I'll stitch this edge, so it's wide enough for three. A home. No one ever defines it correctly. But when three beings sit around a small table sharing a pot of soup made by Misha, and the AI recites a ridiculous love poem about resonance coefficients of the heart they all understand, rumors travel faster than solar storms. Just 3 days after Elith sent out the encrypted signal outpost, 47 FR9 began receiving the first replies. Not from Union headquarters, but from dead satellites, forgotten supply stations, and scraps of old networks once belonging to civilizations erased from the galactic political map. They're listening, Elith whispered, seated close to the relay station, not trusting, but still responding. Mike stood nearby holding a mug of hot coffee, a rare luxury on a frontier like Frista 9. What are they saying? Elith held out a mini-screen. Words flickered across it, softly vibrating. Is it safe to sleep without being awakened by commands? Mike read it, then exhaled deeply. That line alone makes me want to carry them here by hand. Misha entered carrying a basket of freshly harvested greens, just one bunch of kale and 3 roots of suspicious shape. I'll start making extra beds. Over the following week, the first beings began to arrive. Not in droves, no cheering, just old drifting ships once deemed space junk. Each vessel carried a story, a flight, and escape from a system that had failed them. One of them was Kale, a semi-biomechanical being, who once served as a live emotion classification system for a race that controlled society through neural signaling. She had fled after being marked for deactivation for feeling too much empathy toward humans. Kalai said only one thing as she stepped off her ship. Here. May I feel free? Misha nodded. We don't even ban burnt cookies. The old base began to grow. Mike, Misha, and Elith divided the work like they'd done it forever. Misha built a new living space from recycled metal. Mike expanded the energy storage unit. Elith established an underground comm network untraceable called the Warm Thread. At the center of it all was the blanket, still hanging in the shared room, a quiet symbol. Every new being who arrived, no matter their origin, was wrapped in the blanket once. It became a ritual no one explained, but everyone understood. One evening after everyone had gone to sleep, Mike and Misha sat outside for the first time since the night of the battle. The sky was clear, a rarity on Frista 9. Misha Mike asked, "Did you ever think about the future?" She nodded. "I used to think the future was something arranged by others. My father, Varnow, bloodlines." And now she thought for a moment. "Now I think the future is a straight row of kale." He chuckled quietly. She turned to him, her expression more serious. "And you, do you want to leave this planet?" Mike was quiet for a long time. Then he shook his head. "I used to, but now, I think the world doesn't need me anywhere else. Just here with the ones who have nowhere else to go." The next day, something happened that no one expected. A Union ship, not a patrol vessel, but a high-tier strategic class entered Frista 9's space. No warning, no summons. Just one message broadcast across the entire atmosphere on an open-frequency outpost, 47 FR9. "Your actions are being classified as the formation of an unauthorized community outside of regulated oversight. Cease all intake of inhabitants. Surrender all communication logs." Misha frowned. "They can't order that," Elith murmured. "Union may not like what it cannot define." Mike stepped up to the central console. He looked at the two of them, then toward the living hall where dozens of beings were finally sleeping peacefully, some for the first time in years. He spoke. "We're not surrendering anything." The AI spoke slower than usual. "I agree." Misha placed her hand on his. "Then, we'll teach them how to survive the cold." Mike smiled. The Union didn't respond immediately. But the atmosphere had changed. It was no longer the cold of Frista 9. It was the cold that came from organized silence, from invisible eyes now watching a place once thought forgotten. Each night, Elith monitored the spatial frequency bands. No official replies came, but the sublayer code detected faint intrusions, characteristic of Union intelligence systems. "They're listening," she said, "and deliberating action." Mike frowned. "Could it be a blockade? Forced relocation?" Misha rested a hand on her old dagger, her gaze steady. "We've survived one fight. I'm not afraid of another." "We're not fighting," Mike said slowly. "We're living." And then, something unexpected happened. 3 days later, a small non-Union ship landed on the edge of the mining field. Misha and Elith immediately took defensive positions, but Mike signaled them to stand down. The hatch opened and someone, no one thought they'd see again, stepped out. The psychological officer who once came to evaluate them, now wearing a worn brown outfit, no Union insignia. "Don't shoot," she said, hands raised. "I'm seeking asylum." Misha narrowed her eyes. "Why?" "Because I know," the woman replied. "The Union won't stop when they see you building an uncontrollable model of community. I warned them. They told me to take indefinite leave. I have nowhere else to go. But I remember the kale." Mike blinked. What she smiled. "It wasn't as bad as I thought." So the Frista 9 kitchen had to expand again. They added more chairs, make more soup, and built a bed for the woman who had once labeled them a cross-biological pairing case study. Now she called Mike the stubborn engineer, called Misha the warrior who bakes, and Elith the much-needed AI upgrade despite a lack of poetic talent. In the evenings, they listened to leaked Union dispatches about planets starting to ask questions about settlements beginning to request Model 47 FR9 as a new kind of social structure. Not official, not recognized, but spreading. A soft rebellion, Elith called it. Misha liked the term. Like an old blanket, warm and unthreatening until it's too late to stop. But gentle waves always bring countercurrents. One late night, the internal AI warned urgent signal. Encrypted in Union military format. Recommend immediate review. Mike opened the screen. The message contained only 3 lines: draft decree, dissolve outpost. 47 FR9. Reason uncontrollable social model. Action, dismantle infrastructure. Expel or neutralize residents. No sender, no signature, but clear. Mike slumped into his seat. "So, they're coming." Elith nodded. "Could be a week, could be a day, but they won't let this place remain as it is." Misha stepped forward. Quietly, she laid the familiar blanket out on the floor. Then she said, "We start from here." Mike looked at her, then at Elith, then at the former psych officer, now pouring tea for 2 new arrivals, a couple from the Carrot Star system, once part of a genome regulation machine. He stood up. "We won't run, we won't hide, but we won't fight either. Then what do we do, Elith asked. We live, he said, openly, transparently, and without compromise. The next day they built their first sign outside the outpost. A rough wooden board hand-carved Frista 9, a free community. Not by species, not by status, by choice, by blanket. When the Union sent a surveillance ship, they saw no weapons. They saw a small community, a green garden, an AI reciting terrible love poetry, a mismatched group of beings baking together, and a Terran engineer sitting on the porch wrapped in a blanket saying, "If you need a report, I'll file one. But I'm not leaving." No attack happened. No order was carried out. Only one report was sent back to Union Command. No threat detected. Recommendation: acknowledge outpost. 47 FR9 as an autonomous residential zone. No further intervention required. Personal note: the kale was surprisingly good. 1 week after the Union withdrew, snow fell gently like Frista 9 itself was exhaling. No more warships hovering in orbit. No more covert jamming signals. Just steady footsteps, the low hum of the energy regeneration units by the station wall, and the scent of sautéed kale drifting from the kitchen. Mike sat in the engineering room, staring at a stack of new drawings. Not repair schematics anymore, but architectural blueprints for residential expansion. He marked sections, sleeping quarters, study areas, a greenhouse, a music corner. At the bottom in messy, bold letters, central blanket, do not relocate. Misha walked in holding the jacket Mike had torn the day before. Fixed it, she said, placing it on the table. Thanks, Mike smiled. I also added heating to the west corner. Elith nearly froze in her sleep from the draft. She sat beside him, didn't speak for a moment, then asked, "Do you think they'll come back?" Mike didn't need to ask who they were. Maybe he said, or they'll leave us alone, or turn us into something for display, a successful unity model. She smirked. I'm not good at being a symbol. None of us here are. Mike chuckled. Maybe that's why it works. That afternoon, a small ship appeared on radar. No military signals, no official broadcast. Mike, Misha, and Elith went to the outpost perimeter, cautious but no longer afraid. The ship's door opened. A little girl stepped out first, roughly 10 in human years. Curly hair, faintly glowing eyes, markers of genetic lineage from the Soren species. Behind her came an adult, either a parent or guardian, and a gaseous being cloaked in an isolation robe. The girl looked around, trembling. Then in a whisper like breath, "Do you have blankets?" Mike couldn't speak for a moment. Misha stepped forward, knelt down, and opened her backpack. She pulled out a small blanket, soft, not new, but clean. "Here, take it. Here. Everyone has one." The girl clutched it, said nothing more, just stood there gripping it as if she had finally touched something that could get her through the night. That evening, they hosted their first ever blanket banquet. Everyone sat on the floor, each wrapped in their own blanket. The AI played music, a gentle symphony remixed with Misha's soft growls and Elith's low-frequency hums. Mike told the story of the first rice cooker. Misha exploded. Misha recounted the time Elith accidentally frightened an entire pack of energy cats in the cold storage bay. The girl, her name was Say, told them about a dream she had, once a planet where people didn't have to jump at every door creak. No one laughed, but everyone understood. A few days later, Say began working in the garden. She was good at trimming leaves without damaging the stems. Misha taught her how to read soil temperature by scent. Elith gave her a CO2 sensor. Mike just made tea and watched from a distance like an awkward father who couldn't admit he was growing fond. One afternoon, Say asked Uncle Mike, "Is there a school here?" Mike thought for a moment. "Not yet. But if you want to learn, then everyone here is a teacher. Then, if I want to become an engineer like you," he smiled, "then start by dismantling the old heat emitter behind the station and figure out why it's clicking." She jumped up and ran off. Misha peeked around the corner. "You just assigned a 10-year-old to sabotage the base. You said everyone has to learn to live." "Yeah, but maybe start her off with a book." "Frista 9 has no books, just blankets and broken parts." Misha laughed. "And humans are crazy enough to believe that a frozen hellhole can become a home." As night fell, Mike stood by the window looking out at the thick snow. He heard Misha's soft breathing beside him. The AI is reciting a love poem about unclassified emotions. Say's little giggles from the next room. And something else, not sound, not form, but undeniably real, the sense that they had built a place the world couldn't break, with kale, with repairs, with a blanket and a decision not taken back. Then quietly, Misha asked Mike, yeah, what if someday too many people come here and we don't have enough blankets? He turned to her, smiled softly. Then we patched together the old ones, one by one, into something bigger. She was silent for a moment, then whispered, then we won't need a bigger bed, just a blanket wide enough. Frista 9, once marked by the Union as not worth exploiting, had unexpectedly become a bright spot on the galactic map, but not because of resources, not because of strategy, because of rumors. Rumors of a place where the discarded still found welcome, of an unofficial, unregistered station that had warm lights, a tiny garden, and beings who laughed for reasons that appeared in no legal document. And so those who thrived on control began to pay attention. Patrol ships returned, not declaring intent, just silently scanning data. A few underground media channels leaked articles with titles like Frista 9, Haven or Heresy Blankets Can't Replace Law, Humanity and Its Obsession with Emotional Autonomy. Mike received an encrypted message. Brief, they're coming. Not to talk. Either erase everything, or prepare to truly exist. No signature. But Mike had a guess, maybe an old officer still in the Union. Maybe someone who had once visited Frista 9 and understood a place like this could not last long without sacrificing something. A small council was convened in the engineering room, now their de facto meeting chamber, where Elith hung her hand-drawn star map. Say sat cross-legged on a chair, and Misha brought half-finished loaves in a basket. We have two options, Mike began. Either wipe all traces, go into hiding, split up, and live scattered. Or declare ourselves an autonomous community. Misha nodded. Which means we accept confrontation, not with weapons, he replied, but through transparency, the one thing the Union hates most. We won't hide. We'll write our own story. Elith hissed softly. They'll label it political provocation. Then Mike said we'll show them our politics, our kale-broken tools, and patchwork quilts. 3 days later, they sent out a recording. Misha spoke. She stood in the common room, a blanket hung behind her, worn, faded, but patched with cloth from planets across the stars. She spoke calmly, evenly, without incendiary words. Only the truth. I'm Misha, a being with canid genes once hunted for refusing to pair, according to bloodline. I live on Frista 9, a place where we don't ask where you're from, only if you're cold. If you were rejected because you weren't the right kind, we have room for you. If you have no assets, no status, no pedigree, we have a blanket you can share. We are not against anyone, but we will not disappear just because someone finds us inconvenient. And if the Union thinks it can dissolve a community with a shutdown order, then I invite them to come here, share a meal, see the kale, and try to sleep beneath a quilt sewn from the memories of souls no one else wanted to keep. The recording spread, not on official networks, but through back channels, black market data hubs, and dusty hand-passed relays where people still believed in stories told in real voices, not filtered by censorship algorithms. The results didn't arrive overnight, but by morning, 5 more ships had landed on Frista 9. One carried a nurse who had left the Union's health system for refusing to assign emotional indexes to patients. Another carried a drone engineer who refused to install mandatory surveillance. The remaining 3 carried orphans. Mike asked, "Why come here?" The sole adult aboard the 3 ships answered, "Because this is the first place I've heard of where blankets are shared without asking for a genetic barcode." That night, the AI recited a new poem. We are not a community. We are blankets. We are not weapons. We are burnt crust from old ovens. We don't fight. We remain. Everyone laughed. The poem was still awful. But for the first time, no one laughed out of cynicism. Mike sat at the table reviewing the new residency forms. Say was teaching a liquid being how to write its name in common. Misha walked over, placing down a not-burnt muffin. Tired, she asked. No, he said. Just wondering whether we can really build a civilization with only kale blankets and choice. Misha sat beside him, leaning gently on his shoulder. Maybe not enough to rule the universe, she whispered, but enough to make it remember we were here. And so, they sat in silence. in a small space carved out of snow and wind, not loud, not heroic. Just people and beings who had been cast aside trying to live kindly. There were no sirens, no purge orders, no fleets appeared in the sky. Instead, a movement began slow quiet like ice melting from beneath the thickest snow of Frista. On the planet Travalis, a group of students wrote an essay titled, "If Our Society Could Be as Warm as Frista." On Mexer, a mental health facility quietly labeled its new wing as based on the shared blanket model. And across underground forums, a new symbol began to surface, a simple frayed, hand-drawn blanket. No crest, no motto, just a reminder we can begin again. Mike never thought Frista would become a legend. But when the 500th person walked through the base's gates, he understood. They were no longer a small group. They were proof. Proof that community didn't need to start with treaties. Just one person choosing to stay. Just one blanket. Elith pinned a new report to the Wall 501 residents. 37 beings of unclassified species. 21 broken ships converted into homes. 12 crops successfully adapted. One AI currently writing love poems to a rescue vessel. Mike glanced over. Still flirting with that busted ship AI, I feel the curvature of her hull, her thermal response to my ping signals. It might be love. Misha folded the report. Or a glitch. Glitches and love are not mutually exclusive. Meanwhile, say the girl who once shyly asked for a scrap of blanket had become Frista unofficial orientation guide. She taught newcomers how to use the low-energy toilets, how to bake without burning, and most importantly, how to ask for help without shame. Here she said everyone needs a blanket at some point. So if you're cold, just say so. One day, Mike was invited to speak remotely at a summit on Orbital Economic Station 6, a place that once rejected his application for ID renewal due to missing genetic records. He looked into the camera. They asked for 30 seconds. He simply said, "I'm not a leader. I'm just a technician. I didn't create a model. I just tossed a blanket to someone who was cold. And we chose to stay together. If you call that a political act, then maybe humanity's forgotten how to be human." And he turned the camera off. That day, 37 new ships arrived at Frista. One of them carried no passengers, only blankets, hundreds of them soft of all kinds. Each with a small note attached, "I'm not brave enough to come, but I believe you need this more than I do." Misha spent the whole afternoon folding blankets. Mike approached, placing a hand on her shoulder. "What are you going to do with all of them?" "Stitch them together," she replied, "into one giant piece." He blinked. Why? She looked up. "So when the Union looks here, they won't see a population. They'll see a single being. No species, no sections, just one big blanket, and they won't know where to start tearing it apart." That night, they laid the new blanket in the center of Frista main square. Everyone gathered around. No speeches, no slogans. The AI played music. This time it was composed from the heartbeat frequencies of the residents layered together into a rhythmless symphony. Say sat beside Mike, her head resting on his shoulder. Misha sat on his other side, her hand intertwined with his saying nothing. Elith quietly recorded it all. A voice came from the AI, not quite identifiable, possibly synthesized from all of them. "We are not system errors. We are the new system. On Frista, no one needed to ask, 'Who are you?' They only asked, 'Are you cold?' And if someone nodded, a blanket would always be offered." Frista had no anthem, no official territorial map, no capital, no military. But that morning, after 473 consecutive days of relentless snowfall, the skies above Frista opened. Blue, silent, almost gentle. The first to notice was Say. She shouted from the watchtower, "The sky is blue," and just like that, a wave spread out like a resonance ripple. They stepped outside one by one, beings once hidden beneath shadows and regulations. Mist creatures, scaled beings, those who faintly glowed, and humans who carried wounds too quiet to make it into any report. Each of them looked up and fell silent. No one cried, but everyone understood. The true miracle was that they were still here to witness the sky open. Mike sat on the roof of the engineering unit, a cup of hot tea in hand, staring at the sky. Misha sat beside him. No armor, just a fabric coat, back resting against a heat pipe. Her hair, untied for the first time, fluttered gently in the wind. "I didn't think this day would come," Mike said. "Which day?" she asked. "The day I wouldn't feel afraid when the light came." She was quiet for a while. "On my homeworld, light always meant something bad. Light meant being found, being named, being pulled back into the mold." Mike nodded. "For me, it was dark. That's where I didn't have to pretend." Then Misha said, looking up at the sky, "Maybe this is something in between. Not too bright, not completely dark. Like a blanket," she said. Mike chuckled softly. "Everything comes back to that blanket, because it's the only reason we survived." Elith floated over, light and quiet as a shadow. In her hands was a new update. "We've hit 1,000 residents," she said. Mike nearly spilled his tea. "Good Lord, no gods needed," Elith replied. "Just people who know how to share a meal." They held a ceremony, no stage, just a large circle with the community blanket laid in the center. Each resident, from Say to the mutant couples, brought something with them: an old trinket, a scrap of cloth, a memory. Misha stood in the center, raising a worn piece of paper, the original union warning notice, and she tore it in half, not out of anger, but because it was no longer needed. "We survived," she said, "not because we were allowed to, but because we chose not to leave each other." The AI recorded everything, but this time it didn't turn it into poetry. It saved it under a simple file name: The Blanket, Expanded. That night Mike took a walk alone. The breeze was soft. The Western Energy Hub still hummed gently. The kale garden was growing better than expected. He passed through the common room. The blanket was still there, frayed at the edges, patched all over. Arguably the ugliest item in the entire outpost. And yet he walked up and touched it, not to inspect, but to say thank you. Behind him, Misha entered quietly. "Mike, yeah, I want to ask, one last time, before it becomes a symbol no one dares to touch." He turned around. "Do you want to keep using it?" Elith floated over, light and quiet as a shadow. In her hands was a new update. "We've hit 1,000 residents," she said. Mike nearly spilled his tea. "Good Lord, no gods needed," Elith replied. "Just people who know how to share a meal." They held a ceremony, no stage, just a large circle with the community blanket laid in the center. Each resident, from Say to the mutant couples, brought something with them: an old trinket, a scrap of cloth, a memory. Misha stood in the center, raising a worn piece of paper, the original union warning notice, and she tore it in half. Not out of anger, but because it was no longer needed. "We survived," she said. "Not because we were allowed to, but because we chose not to leave each other." The AI recorded everything, but this time it didn't turn it into poetry. It saved it under a simple fill name: The Blanket, Expanded. That night Mike took a walk alone. The breeze was soft. The Western Energy Hub still hummed gently. The kale garden was growing better than expected. He passed through the common room. The blanket was still there, frayed at the edges, patched all over. Arguably the ugliest item in the entire outpost. And yet he walked up and touched it, not to inspect, but to say thank you. Behind him, Misha entered quietly. "Mike, yeah, I want to ask, one last time, before it becomes a Simbo, and how to share a blanket properly." That night they sent a new message, unencrypted, open for the entire fringe sector. If you have nowhere left to go, if you've ever been rejected for being different, if all you want is to sleep without being woken by a command, then Frista 9 has a place for you. Bring a blanket if you have one. If not, we'll share half of ours.